There are a million ways for a heart to break, but the cruelest is when the hammer is held by your own blood. My brother, Ryan, was an expert at demolition. He didn't just break my heart, he spent my entire childhood grinding the pieces into dust under his heel. He had this theory, you see, that if he could make me believe I was nothing, then I would become nothing. And for years, in the suffocating silence of our house on Maple Avenue, his theory was dangerously close to becoming fact. But he made one critical mistake. He never realized that from dust you can make glass, and from glass you can build a mirror big enough to force someone to see the monster they truly are. This is the story of how I took every single piece of pain he gave me and built a stage so bright it would cast a shadow big enough for him to get lost in forever. It's a story about the quiet, brutal patience of revenge. If you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever been made to feel invisible by the one person who was supposed to see you, then you know the fire I'm talking about. Stick with me, and I'll tell you how I turned that fire into an inferno. And do me a favor while you're here. Hit that like button and subscribe, because the best revenge is a story that the whole world gets to hear. It started, as most tragedies do, in the mundane. In the hallways of a 2-story suburban house that always smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner and unspoken disappointment. I was 16, an age that feels like you're perpetually holding your breath, waiting for your real life to begin. My world was a landscape of soft-focus anxiety, algebra homework I didn't understand, friends who felt more like temporary allies, and the constant, suffocating presence of my brother, Ryan. Ryan was 2 years older, and he moved through the world with an unearned confidence that baffled me. He was handsome in that lazy, athletic way that seemed to captivate everyone. Football captain, easy A's without trying, a grin that could charm our parents out of any punishment. To the outside world, he was the golden child, the perfect son, but in the quiet corridors of our home, when the audience was gone, he was a different person. He was a craftsman, and his chosen material was my self-esteem. His workshop was my bedroom. The door was a flimsy piece of hollow core wood, painted an optimistic shade of lilac that felt like a lie. It offered no protection. He never knocked. He'd just appear, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed, a smirk already playing on his lips. He had a sixth sense for my moments of vulnerability. If I was struggling with a line for the school play, he'd be there. If I was staring at my reflection in the mirror, hating the way my jeans fit, he'd materialize. "What are you looking at?" he'd ask, his voice dripping with false curiosity. I'd turn away from the mirror, my cheeks burning. "Nothing." "Good. Because there's nothing to see." He'd let the words hang in the air, sharp and precise. Then came the litany, the 3-word curse he had designed just for me. He'd say it slowly, dissecting me with each syllable. Fat. The word would land like a punch to the gut. I'd instinctively wrap my arms around my stomach. Dumb. My eyes would drop to the floor, my brain feeling thick and useless. Nobody will ever look at you. And that was the killer, the finality of it. It wasn't just an insult, it was a prophecy. He'd deliver it with a look of profound satisfaction, as if he'd just solved a complex equation. Then, the finale, he would slam my bedroom door. The bang would echo through the house, a punctuation mark on his victory. It was a sound that said, "I win. You lose. Story over." And I, on the other side of that door, would just stand there, the vibrations traveling up through the soles of my feet. Every single insult was a shard of broken glass he was implanting directly into my chest. I could feel them in there, rattling around, cutting me from the inside with every breath I took. I learned to breathe shallowly. Our parents were ghosts in our story. They were good people, I think, but they were tired. Tired from long hours at jobs they didn't love. Tired from the mortgage. Tired from the quiet hum of their own unfulfilled dreams. They saw the rivalry between Ryan and me as normal sibling stuff. "He's just teasing, Emma," my mom would say, not looking up from the bills she was sorting at the kitchen table. "You have to learn to toughen up." Toughen up. It felt like telling someone who was bleeding to just clot faster. They couldn't see the precision of his cruelty. They didn't see the way his eyes would glint when he found a new insecurity to exploit. They heard teasing. I felt surgery without anesthesia. He never left a visible mark, and so, in their eyes, no crime had been committed. My only sanctuary was the school auditorium. It was a dusty, cavernous place that smelled of old wood, velvet curtains, and the faint, electric scent of the lighting board. On that stage, under the warm wash of the Fresnel lights, I could be someone else. I wasn't Emma, Ryan's sister. I was Rosalind from As You Like It. I was Emily in our town. I was anyone but me. The drama club was a collection of other misfits, kids who felt more comfortable in someone else's skin than their own. Our teacher, Mr. Henderson, was a kind man with a booming voice and eyes that seemed to see the potential in us that we couldn't see in ourselves. He was the first person who ever told me I had a gift. "You have emotional honesty, Emma," he said to me once after a rehearsal. "When you're on that stage, I believe you. Don't ever lose that." I clung to those words like a life raft. Emotional honesty. Ryan would have called it being weak, a crybaby, but Mr. Henderson called it a gift. My dream began to take shape in that dusty auditorium. It was a fragile, secret thing. I started reading plays obsessively, then books on acting, then screenwriting guides. Late at night, when the house was finally still and Ryan was asleep, I'd be at my desk, a small lamp casting a golden circle of light on my notebook. I'd fill pages with scenes, with dialogue, with characters who were brave and witty and strong, everything I wasn't. I was writing myself into existence. This secret world was my armor. It was the only place his words couldn't reach. Of course, he found a way. The school was putting on a production of The Glass Menagerie. The lead role was Laura Wingfield, the painfully shy, fragile girl who retreats into the fantasy world of her glass animal collection. I felt a profound connection to her. I understood her desire to live in a world of beautiful, delicate things, safe from the harshness of reality. I studied the script for weeks. I knew Laura's lines, her motivations, her heartbreaks, as if they were my own. The audition was the most important thing in my life. The day of the callbacks, I was a wreck of nerves. I practiced my monologue in my room, whispering the lines to myself, trying to calm my racing heart. The door flew open. Ryan stood there, holding one of my scripts, my screenwriting notebook, the one I kept hidden under my mattress. My blood ran cold. "What's this?" he asked, flipping through the pages with a dismissive air. "The Starlight Cafe?" "Echoes in the Rain." "Seriously?" He laughed, a short, barking sound that held no humor. "You actually think you can write?" I lunged for the notebook, but he held it out of reach. "Give it back, Ryan." My voice was a pathetic tremble. She walks into the room, a sad symphony in a summer dress. A sad symphony. He read the line out loud, his voice a mocking imitation of a dramatic narrator. "God, you're so stupid. You're not a writer. You're not an actress. You're just a sad, fat girl playing dress-up in her room." He wasn't just attacking my hobby, he was attacking my soul. He was in my sanctuary, tearing down the one thing that was truly mine. And then he did something that broke me in a way he never had before. He looked at The Glass Menagerie, script in my hand. "You're trying out for that," he sneered. "Let me guess. You're going for Laura, the crippled, pathetic loser who nobody wants. It's perfect for you. You don't even have to act." Every shard of glass inside my chest twisted at once. The pain was so sharp, so absolute, it stole the air from my lungs. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. He saw the look on my face. He saw that he'd finally, completely won. He tossed my notebook onto my bed. "Don't embarrass the family name," he said, his voice cold. And then he slammed the door. Bang. This time, something was different. I stood in the echoing silence, and the tears I expected to come didn't. Instead, a strange, cold calm washed over me. The pain was still there, a white-hot core in the center of my being, but it was changing. It was crystallizing. hardening into something else. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw the girl he described, the sad eyes, the trembling lip. But for the first time, I saw something else behind her. A flicker, a tiny, defiant spark in the absolute darkness. He said I was Laura Wingfield, a fragile girl in a world of glass. He was wrong. Glass is fragile, yes. But glass can also be ground down, melted, and forged in fire. It can be made into a lens to focus light into a single, burning point. I didn't go to the callbacks. I couldn't. He had poisoned it for me. I stayed in my room and let the defeat wash over me, let it soak into my bones. I let myself feel the absolute, crushing weight of it all. And then I picked up my pen. I opened a fresh page in a new notebook. At the top of the page, I wrote 2 words: the plan. The plan was simple. The plan was impossible. I was going to get out. I was going to go to the one place where dreams were manufactured. I was going to go to Los Angeles. I was going to become someone. Not for me, not anymore. The dream had changed. It was no longer about escaping into other characters. It was about building a version of myself so strong, so successful, so unavoidable that one day he wouldn't be able to look away. He would be forced to see me, and in my reflection, he would see everything he had tried to destroy. The prophecy he had written for me, fat, dumb, nobody, I was going to burn it. And I was going to use the fire he had started to light the match. The war wasn't over. He had just won a battle, but I was about to change the entire map. Los Angeles wasn't a city, it was a mirage. From my bedroom in Ohio, it had shimmered with promise, a golden land of opportunity. Up close, it was a sprawling beast of concrete, smog and relentless, soul-crushing sunshine. The dream felt further away than ever. I was 18 years old with $312 in my pocket, money saved from a series of soul-destroying part-time jobs. Scooping ice cream, folding sweaters at the mall, babysitting bratty kids. It was barely enough for the security deposit on a shoebox apartment in the San Fernando Valley, a place where the heat was a physical presence and the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbors' nightly arguments as if they were happening on my pillow. My life became a brutalist routine. I found a job waiting tables at a greasy spoon diner called the Comet. It was the kind of place that was perpetually sticky, smelling of burnt coffee and desperation. My uniform was a hideous polyester, dress the color of faded mustard. My days were a blur of refilling coffee cups, balancing plates up my arm, and smiling through the condescending remarks of customers. My nights were spent in acting classes I couldn't really afford, taught by jaded instructors who had once had dreams of their own. "You're holding back, Emma," one of them, a man named Victor, told me after a scene study. "There's a wall around you. I can't see past it." I wanted to scream, "Of course there's a wall. It's made of every insult, every slammed door, every moment of worthlessness I've ever felt. It's what's holding me together." But I just nodded and said, "I'll work on it." The rejections were constant. They were a part of the city's ecosystem, like the palm trees and the traffic. I went to open casting calls, cattle calls, where I was herded into rooms with 100 other girls who looked just like me, only prettier, thinner, more confident. We were given 30 seconds to read 2 lines for a toothpaste commercial or a slasher film where our only role was to scream and die. Most of the time, I didn't even get to read. A casting director would give me a single, sweeping glance, a look that took in my slightly too wide hips and my not quite symmetrical face, and say, "Thank you, next." The dismissal was so casual, so profound. It was Ryan's voice, amplified 1,000 times, echoed in the bored sighs of the industry's gatekeepers. I papered my tiny apartment's walls with their feedback. The polite rejections, the brutal ones, the headshots they'd handed back to me. One casting director, a woman with sharp bangs and an even sharper tongue, had scribbled on the back of mine, "Girl next door, but on a bad street." I tacked it right above my bed. It was the first thing I saw in the morning and the last thing I saw at night. It was fuel. There were so many nights I almost broke. I'd come home after a 12-hour shift at the diner, my feet throbbing, my clothes smelling of grease, my pockets empty except for a few crumpled dollar bills. I'd sit on my lumpy mattress, the sounds of the city pressing in, and the loneliness would be a physical weight. I'd think about home. I'd think about the deceptive comfort of my lilac-colored bedroom. I'd even miss the smell of my mom's cooking. I'd call them on Sundays, the only time I could be sure Ryan wouldn't be around. I became a master of cheerful deception. "It's amazing, Mom," I'd say, my voice bright and breezy, while staring at a cockroach scuttling across my floor. "The weather is incredible. I've had a few really promising auditions. I think things are about to take off." "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," she'd reply, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Ryan says hello. He just got a promotion at the bank." Of course he did. Ryan's life was a smooth, upward trajectory. He'd gone to the state university, gotten a business degree, and stepped into a comfortable job his friend's father had arranged. He was succeeding effortlessly, just like he always had. The injustice of it would burn in my throat, hot and bitter like bad coffee. My first breakthrough, if you could call it that, came after a year of relentless failure. It was a role in an independent film, a gritty drama about runaway teens. The character's name was Waitress Number 2. I had 3 lines. My big scene involved me pouring coffee and asking the protagonist, "You gonna eat that?" I treated that role like it was Lady Macbeth. I created an entire backstory for Waitress Number 2. I named her Chloe. I decided she was from Arizona and had dreams of being a dental hygienist. I spent hours practicing how to hold the coffee pot, how to shift my weight with the weary resignation of a woman on her feet all day. The director, a young guy named Alex with intense eyes and a passion that bordered on mania, actually noticed. After we wrapped my scene, he came over to me. "Hey," he said, "you're Waitress Number 2, right?" "Emma." I corrected him gently. "Right, Emma. You were good. You were present. Most people in these roles are just waiting to say their line. You were living in the scene." It was the first real compliment I had received in this city. It was a drop of water in a vast desert, and I drank it down greedily. The movie was never released. It ran out of funding and disappeared into cinematic oblivion. But it didn't matter. I had done it. I had been in a film. I had a credit for my resume, a clip for my reel. I had something real. That tiny victory gave me the strength to keep going. I started getting slightly better roles. Nurse with clipboard. Panicked shopper number 3. Girl who finds the body. I was becoming the queen of nameless women with brief, functional appearances. I was still serving coffee at the Comet, still living in my shoebox, but the wall of rejections was now dotted with a few small, hard-won successes. I found a small community, a tribe of fellow strivers. There was Sarah, a fiery redhead who was my shift partner at the diner and had a wicked sense of humor. There was Ben, a struggling screenwriter who wrote beautiful, heartbreaking scripts that would never get made. We would meet at a dive bar after our shifts, nursing cheap beers and sharing our war stories from the trenches of Hollywood. They were the first people who saw me not as Ryan's sister or as girl next door on a bad street, but as Emma. "You have this quiet strength," Ben told me one night after I'd recounted a particularly awful audition for a yogurt commercial. "It's like still waters run deep. They just don't know what they're looking at yet." His words were a balm. But Ryan's voice was a ghost that haunted me, a constant whisper in the back of my mind. Fat. Dumb. Nobody. The echo of it was loudest when I looked in the mirror. Hollywood has a way of magnifying every insecurity until it's all you can see. I was surrounded by impossible standards of beauty. I started to obsess over my weight, counting calories until my head spun. I'd go for long runs in the suffocating valley heat, punishing my body, trying to shrink myself into a shape the industry would find acceptable. One day, I fainted on the sidewalk. I woke up to a stranger holding a water bottle to my lips. In that moment, lying on the hot concrete, I heard Ryan's laugh in my head. He was still winning. He was still in control. That was the lowest point. I realized I had traveled 2,000 miles just to build a new cage for myself, one made of calorie counts and self-loathing. I had let his voice become my own inner monologue. Lying on my bed that night, I made a decision. I was done trying to be what they wanted. I was done trying to be thin enough, pretty enough, perfect enough. My strength wasn't going to be in my appearance. Mr. Henderson had told me my gift was emotional honesty. Victor, my acting coach, had said there was a wall around me. They were both right. The wall was real, but it wasn't a weakness. It was a fortress. And inside that fortress was every ounce of pain, rage, and resilience I had ever felt. It was time to open the gates. The next day, I walked into an audition for a TV legal drama. It was for the role of a grieving mother whose son had been wrongly convicted of a crime. She was a guest spot, but she had a monster of a monologue in a courtroom scene. The waiting room was filled with women who looked the part, older, more experienced, with impressive resumes. I was too young, too unknown. I should have been intimidated. But when they called my name, I walked into that room with a new kind of energy. I didn't try to be charming. I didn't try to be pretty. I just stood on the mark, took a breath, and thought of Ryan. I thought of the slammed door. I thought of my stolen notebook. I thought of the words, crippled, pathetic loser. I opened my mouth, and it wasn't a performance. It was a testimony. The grief, the rage, the unwavering belief in her son's innocence, it all poured out of me, raw and unfiltered. I wasn't acting. I was finally telling the truth. When I finished, the room was silent. The casting director, a woman known for her icy demeanor, was just staring at me. She wasn't looking at my hips or my face. She was looking at me. "Okay," she said, her voice quiet. "Thank you, Emma." I walked out of that room feeling strangely light. I didn't care if I got the part. Something had shifted. I had found my voice. 2 days later, my flip phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. A man introduced himself as a talent agent. "I was in the room for your audition for Law and Order, LA," he said. "The casting director," she called me. "She said I had to see you. She said she'd never seen anything like it. You didn't get the part. They went with a bigger name, of course. But listen, kid, you've got something. I want to represent you." It wasn't a yes. It was a no. But it was the most beautiful, promising no I had ever heard. It wasn't the destination, not even close. But for the first time, after years of wandering in the desert, I could finally see the road. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this road was going to lead me somewhere Ryan would never, ever be able to follow. The ghost of his voice was still there, but now, for the first time, I had a voice of my own to shout back. And it was just starting to get loud. His name was David Chin, and he was the opposite of everything I expected a Hollywood agent to be. He wasn't slick or loud. His office was a small, cluttered space above a ramen shop in Koreatown, and it smelled of old paper and ginger. He was a small, neat man in his 50s with a calm demeanor that was more like a librarian than a shark. He didn't make grand promises. He didn't tell me I was going to be a star. "Here's the deal, Emma," he said, leaning back in his creaky office chair during our first meeting. "What you did in that audition room was lightning in a bottle. Raw, uncut, dangerous talent. My job is not to change that. My job is to find the people smart enough to not be afraid of it." He pushed a contract across the desk. "This will be a slow, ugly, frustrating climb. You'll get 100 no's for every yes. You'll be underpaid and overlooked. But if you trust me and do the work, we'll get you in the right rooms. The rest is up to you." I signed the contract. For the first time in Los Angeles, I felt like I had an anchor. David was true to his word. The climb was slow, but the auditions he sent me on were different. They weren't for toothpaste commercials or nameless victims. They were for characters with substance, women with scars. I started booking guest spots. My first was on a gritty detective show, playing a meth-addicted informant who breaks down during an interrogation. I spent a week researching, watching documentaries, trying to understand the physiology of addiction, the bone-deep desperation. I wanted to honor the character, not just play a stereotype. The director barely spoke to me, but the day after it aired, David called. "The showrunner loved you," he said, his voice flat, but carrying the weight of a significant victory. "They said you made them uncomfortable in the best way possible. They're keeping you in mind." It became a pattern. A few episodes of a hospital drama here, a recurring arc on a cable series about a biker gang there. Each role was a small step up the ladder. I was finally making enough money to quit the diner. I moved into a slightly larger apartment in a slightly better neighborhood, one where the arguments I heard through the walls were at least about more interesting things. I was a working actress. It was a title I wore like a badge of honor. With each small success, the phone calls home became more surreal. My mom was bursting with a kind of bewildered pride. She'd tell all her friends at the grocery store that her daughter was on television. "We saw you on Chicago Fire last night, honey," she'd exclaim. "You were so convincing as that paramedic, though it was very gruesome. Do you have to do such gruesome things?" I'd laugh and reassure her. Then would come the inevitable update on Ryan. He was a junior vice president at the bank now. He and his longtime girlfriend, a perfectly manicured woman named Tiffany, had just bought a house in a gated community. "I told Ryan you were on another show," she'd say, her voice dropping slightly, as if she were imparting a delicate secret. He said it's good you're keeping busy, but he hopes you're putting money away, for when the novelty wears off." The novelty. He still saw my entire life, my struggle, my passion as a childish phase. A novelty. He still couldn't, or wouldn't, see it as real. The dismissiveness was no longer a shout or a slammed door. It was a quiet, condescending pat on the head from 2,000 miles away. It was somehow more infuriating. The shards of glass in my chest weren't gone. They had just settled, lying dormant, waiting. The script that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning via email from David. The subject line was just one word: this. The project was titled Shattered Echo. It was an independent film written and directed by Lena Petrova, a fiercely brilliant and notoriously difficult auteur known for her uncompromising portraits of damaged women. The script told the story of a woman named Clara who returns to her childhood home to care for her ailing father, a man who had emotionally terrorized her for her entire life. It was a brutal, intimate story about the long, tangled shadows of family trauma. It was also the most terrifying and beautiful thing I had ever read. I understood Clara. I knew her silences. I knew the way she held her body, as if constantly bracing for a blow that might never come. I knew the complex, poisonous cocktail of love and hate she felt for her tormentor. "I have to do this," I told David over the phone, my voice shaking. "I know," he said. "Lena is a dragon. She'll eat you alive if you're not prepared. But if you can survive her, this is the one." The audition process was grueling. It wasn't about reading lines. It was about excavation. Lena had me do 3-hour improvisation sessions. She'd ask me deeply personal questions. She was testing my limits, looking for the cracks, wanting to see if I had the guts to break open. In the final callback, she gave me a simple instruction. "Forget the script," she said, her accent sharp, her eyes like black ice. "Look at me, and show me what it looks like the moment a girl realizes the person who is supposed to love her the most is also the person who wishes she didn't exist." I didn't have to act. I just had to remember. I stood there, and I let the memory of Ryan slamming my bedroom door wash over me. I let the sting of his words, fat, dumb, nobody, fill my senses. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went empty. It was a hollowing out, a quiet surrender to a pain so profound it was almost peaceful. That was the truth of it. The real horror wasn't the noise. It was the silence that came after. Lena just watched me for a long, unbearable minute. Then she nodded once. "You have it," she said, making Shattered Echo was the hardest thing I've ever done. We shot in a remote, decaying farmhouse in rural Canada for 2 months. The environment was claustrophobic, the weather was bleak, and Lena was relentless. She demanded absolute emotional immersion. She'd keep the cameras rolling long after a scene was over, capturing the raw, unguarded moments of exhaustion and despair. She pushed me to the edge of my own sanity. There was one scene, the centerpiece of the film, where Clara finally confronts her father. She's supposed to unload a lifetime of rage and pain. We did 17 takes. I was screaming, crying, throwing things. By the end, my voice was gone, my body was trembling, and I felt completely hollowed out. I was failing. Lena called a halt and walked over to me. She put a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was surprisingly gentle. "Stop performing your pain, Emma," she whispered, her voice low and intense. "Just show me the wound. That's all I need to see." I closed my eyes. I didn't think of the character's father. I thought of Ryan. I thought of my screenwriting notebook in his hands, his mocking laughter filling my bedroom. I thought of him calling me a pathetic loser. The wound. He was the wound. Again, I rasped to Lena. The camera rolled. And this time it was different. The rage was still there, but it was cold now. It was the calm, precise fury of a survivor, not a victim. It was the voice of a girl who had finally found the words. The take was quiet, devastating, and utterly real. When it was over, the entire crew was silent. I had taken the ugliest part of myself, the part Ryan had created, and turned it into art. The film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival. Sitting in that massive, dark theater, watching my face projected 20 feet high, was a deeply unsettling experience. I saw my own pain, my own secrets, laid bare for hundreds of strangers to see. When the credits rolled, there was a beat of stunned silence, and then the theater erupted. It wasn't just applause, it was a roar, a wave of sound that washed over me, a feeling of acceptance so overwhelming it brought tears to my eyes. The buzz started immediately. The film was hailed as a masterpiece. My performance was singled out. The words critics used were surreal, a star-making turn, a raw, fearless, heartbreaking performance. And then the whispers began. The impossible, ridiculous, capital O word, Oscar. I tried to ignore it. It was too much to even contemplate. But the whispers grew louder. The film got a theatrical release, and suddenly my life was a whirlwind of interviews, photo shoots, and red carpets. I was on the cover of magazines. I was a guest on talk shows. I was no longer a working actress. I was a contender. The morning of the nominations, my friends Sarah and Ben came over to my apartment before sunrise. We huddled on the couch, drinking coffee, a nervous, electric energy buzzing between us. We watched the live stream on my laptop. When they got to Best Actress, my heart was hammering against my ribs, so hard I thought it might break free. They read 4 names. None of them were mine. I felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief. It was okay. Getting this far was already a miracle. And the final nominee, the announcer said, is Emma Stone for La La Land. There was a confused pause in the room. Ben looked at me. Wait, did he say? The announcer cleared his throat. My apologies. Emma Stone is a previous winner. I meant Emma Stanton. For shattered echo. The world tilted on its axis. Sarah screamed. Ben started laughing, a wild, incredulous sound. I just sat there, frozen, the 2 names echoing in my head. Emma Stanton. My name. He'd said my name. The joy came first, a pure, effervescent wave. But right behind it came something else. Something cold and clear and sharp. A single, powerful thought. He has to be there. This wasn't enough. The articles, the television appearances, my name in the headlines, it was all abstract. He could dismiss it. He could call it a novelty. But he couldn't dismiss me, in the flesh, on the biggest stage in the world. He had to witness it. He had to sit in a room full of the most powerful people in our industry and watch the girl he called a nobody be celebrated. That afternoon I called my mother. My voice was calm, measured. full of the practiced warmth of an actress. "Mom, I don't know how to say this," I began, injecting a slight tremor of disbelief. "I was nominated for an Academy Award." The ensuing chaos on her end of the line was exactly what I expected. Tears, joyful shrieks, a call for my dad to pick up the extension. After the congratulations had subsided, I set my trap. "It would mean everything to me if you guys could be there," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "All of you. You, Dad, and Ryan, too. I want my whole family with me." There was a pause. "Oh, honey," my mom said, her voice watery. "Ryan will be so thrilled. He is just so proud of you." The lie was so blatant, so reflexive, it was almost funny. Proud? Ryan didn't know the meaning of the word. "I'll fly you all out," I continued, twisting the knife of my manufactured kindness. "I'll get you a hotel. I have an extra ticket. Please, Mom. It wouldn't be the same without him." It was a perfect performance. The loving daughter wanting to share her success. She bought every word. She promised she'd talk to Ryan, but she knew he'd come. How could he refuse? It would make him look petty jealous. And Ryan was many things, but he always cared about appearances. He would come. When I hung up the phone, I walked over to the large window in my living room that overlooked the sprawling lights of Los Angeles, the city that had almost broken me, the city that had now nominated me for its highest honor. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Ryan was coming. He thought he was coming to a party, a celebration of his little sister's bizarre stroke of luck. He had no idea he was the guest of honor at an execution. My execution, the public death of the sad, fat, dumb nobody he had created. I stood there for a long time, watching the lights twinkle, feeling the cold, hard certainty of my plan. The final act was about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I was the one writing the script. The day of the Oscars felt like a dream someone else was having. It didn't feel real. A team of people I didn't know descended upon my hotel suite before dawn. Hairstylists, makeup artists, a publicist who spoke in a rapid-fire shorthand I could barely understand. They were all buzzing with an energy that was a mixture of panic and excitement. They were the architects of the illusion, the team responsible for transforming Emma Stanton, the girl who used to wipe down sticky tables at the Comet, into Emma Stanton, the nominee. And then there was the gown. It had been custom-made for me by a legendary designer. When they unzipped the bag, it was like a sigh of fabric. It was a deep midnight blue, covered in thousands of tiny, hand-sewn beads that glittered like a captured galaxy. When I slipped it on, it felt less like a dress and more like armor. It was cool against my skin, and the weight of it was grounding. I looked at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. She was poised, elegant, her eyes holding calm fire. The hair, the makeup, the gown, it was all a costume. But for the first time, the costume felt like it matched the person I had become on the inside. My family was staying in a suite down the hall. My mom had called me 6 times already, each call a new burst of frantic excitement. I knew I had to see them before we left. Taking a deep breath, I walked down the plushly carpeted hallway and knocked on their door. My dad opened it, his face splitting into a proud, overwhelmed grin. He was wearing a rented tuxedo that was a little too tight in the shoulders. My mom was already crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, careful not to ruin her makeup. And then I saw him, Ryan. He was standing by the window, looking out over the Hollywood Hills. He was older now, of course. His hair was starting to thin slightly at the temples, and there were fine lines around his eyes. He looked ordinary. He was just a man, a junior vice president from Ohio, wearing a suit that looked like it belonged to someone else. The mythical, monstrous power he had held over me for so long seemed to have evaporated under the bright California sun. He turned, and his eyes met mine. The smirk was gone. In its place was a look of profound, undisguised disbelief. He looked at me as if I were an alien, an impossible creature that had somehow taken the shape of his sister. His gaze traveled from the top of my professionally styled hair down to the hem of the celestial gown, and I could see the mental calculation happening behind his eyes. He was trying to reconcile this image with the girl whose notebook he had mocked, the girl whose dreams he had ridiculed. And he couldn't. The equation didn't balance. "Emma," he said, and his voice was flat, lifeless. "Ryan," I replied, my voice even and cool. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," he said, the words sounding hollow. An awkward silence fell between us. My mom, sensing the strange tension, rushed to fill it. "Doesn't she look beautiful, Ryan? Like a real movie star?" He just nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. He was searching for a crack in my facade. He was looking for the scared 16-year-old girl. She was still in there, of course, but she was buried deep, deep beneath layers of resilience and resolve. He would never see her again. The limousine ride to the Dolby Theater was a blur of flashing lights and screaming fans. Walking the red carpet was like being on another planet. The sheer volume of it was overwhelming. The roar of the crowd, the cacophony of hundreds of photographers shouting my name, the blinding, relentless strobes of their flashes. I moved through it all in a state of calm detachment. I smiled. I posed. I answered questions from reporters. With every step, I could feel Ryan walking a few paces behind me, alongside my parents. He was invisible here, a nobody, just the plus one of a nominee. I could feel his irrelevance like a tangible force. He was suffocating in my spotlight. Inside, the theater was a breathtaking sea of beautiful, famous faces. People I had only ever seen on screen were nodding at me, smiling, wishing me luck. It was surreal. My seat was in the front section, a few rows from the stage. My parents and Ryan were seated further back in a less prestigious section. As a publicist led me to my seat, we walked right past their row. I paused. I looked directly at Ryan. His face was pale. He looked small in his seat, swallowed up by the opulence and power of the room. His eyes were wide, darting around, trying to take it all in. He looked like a child who had wandered into the king's court by mistake. He was a tourist in my world. "Enjoy the show," I said, my voice just loud enough for him to hear. Then I turned and continued down the aisle, taking my place among the titans of the industry. The game was in play. The ceremony was 3 hours of agonizing tension. I watched other people win, watched them give breathless, tearful speeches. With every category that passed, my heart beat a little faster. I could feel Ryan's presence behind me, a pinpoint of resentful energy in a room full of celebration. I never turned to look at him, but I knew he was watching my every move. Finally, they announced the award for Best Actress. The presenter, a legendary actor I had admired my whole life, walked to the podium. He read the names of the nominees. When he said my name, the camera found me, and my face was projected onto the giant screens on either side of the stage. For a split second, I saw myself as the world saw me, composed, serene, a nominee. The presenter fumbled with the envelope. The theater held its collective breath. The silence was absolute. "And the Oscar goes to," he paused, a small smile playing on his lips, "Emma Stanton for Shattered Echo." The world exploded. The sound that hit me was a physical force, a tidal wave of applause and cheers. People around me were standing, turning to hug me. David, my agent, was grabbing my arm, his face split by a grin of pure joy. It was happening. It was real. I rose to my feet. The walk to the stage felt like it took a year. The spotlight found me, a circle of pure, white heat, and I felt a strange, profound sense of calm. This was it. This was the moment the plan had been leading to. This was the destination. I accepted the golden statue. It was heavier than I'd imagined, solid and cold in my trembling hands. I walked to the microphone, and the applause slowly began to die down. I looked out into the vast darkness of the theater, at the thousands of faces turned toward me, and I searched. It took me a moment, but I found him. His face, illuminated by the faint glow from the stage, was a perfect portrait of stunned shock. His mouth was slightly agape. His eyes were locked on me. He wasn't just watching. He was a prisoner, forced to bear witness. I took a breath. I had rehearsed a speech full of thank yous. To Lena, to David, to my parents. But in that moment, looking at my brother's face, a different speech came out. The real one. There's a long list of people I need to thank, I began, my voice steady and clear, ringing through the silent hall. But tonight, I want to start by thanking the people who don't believe in you. A curious murmur went through the audience. I kept my eyes fixed on Ryan. To anyone who has ever been told that their dreams are stupid, that they are not enough, that they should just disappear. I see you. I let the words land. I saw a flicker of comprehension in Ryan's eyes, a dawning horror. They tell you that you are fat. They tell you that you are dumb. They tell you that nobody will ever look at you. I said the words. His words. I said them out loud, on the biggest stage in the world, broadcasting his private, poisonous cruelty to millions of people. I saw his face crumble. The blood drained from it. He looked like he had been struck. I raised the statue slightly, its golden surface reflecting the bright lights. I am standing here tonight to tell you that those words are lies, but they are also a gift. They are the flint that strikes the spark. So to everyone who ever told me I wasn't good enough, I said, and now I was speaking only to him, my voice ringing with the clarity of a bell. You built the fire that brought me here tonight. The theater erupted. The applause was deafening, a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. It was a standing ovation. The camera flashes were like a strobe light, capturing the moment for eternity. The world was cheering for the girl my brother had tried to erase. And Ryan? He had no choice. He was forced to stand. He was forced to clap. I watched him, hidden in the crowd, his hands moving in a hollow, mechanical motion. A man trapped in the blinding glare of a triumph he had inadvertently engineered. He was applauding his own defeat. He was just another face in the crowd, lost in the shadows, while the entire world shouted my name. He had slammed the door on me 1,000 times, but I had the last word, and the whole world heard it. Later that night, at the governor's ball, I stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The Oscars sat on a table beside me, cool and solid. People kept coming up to congratulate me, to tell me how moved they were by my speech. They saw it as a universal message of empowerment, and it was. But for me, it was deeply, singularly personal. It was the closing of a circle. I thought about Ryan. I didn't feel hatred anymore. I didn't even feel anger. What I felt was a profound and quiet pity. His cruelty had been the defining force of my youth, the engine of my ambition. And now, it was gone. I had taken the power he had over me, melted it down, and forged it into this new life, this incredible, impossible reality. He had given me my greatest wound, and in turn I had given him his. The difference was my wound had healed into a scar that made me stronger. His was fresh, and it would be a long, long time before he learned how to live with it. The glass shards were finally gone from my chest. In their place was a quiet, steady warmth. It wasn't the fiery heat of revenge anymore. It was just peace. The fire he had built had finally burned itself out. And in the embers, I was finally, truly free. The most powerful revenge isn't about destruction. It's about building a life so magnificent that your detractors become irrelevant footnotes in your story. If my story resonated with you, let me know in the comments below. What was the moment you knew you had to fight for yourself? Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the triumph of the human spirit.